Hi, I'm Angie Pontani, the burlesque superstar who has spent the last 20 years shimmying and shaking around the globe. I've performed in showrooms, ballrooms, small rooms, and big rooms, every room except a mushroom. Along the way, I've met some amazing people, and I'd like to introduce them to you. Together, we will pull back the curtain to reveal what really happens behind the glitter, feathers, and tassels. So join me for the bump and grind. Today's guest was dubbed the King of Burlesque by the Sydney Morning Herald. Russell Beattie began as a stagehand for the famed Whoopee Club of London and went on to help light the fire under Australia's emerging burlesque scene in the early 2000s. He mounted epic and ambitious tours featuring Australian acts as well as bringing over international acts, including me. He ran his own venue, the Vanguard, which served as a home base for several burlesque runs, and it's where he created the larger-than-life Empire Strips Back stage show. You've probably seen it. It's gone viral on the old interwebs several times, and it tours frequently in a non-pandemic era. But I would be remiss to mention that today's guest not only has had an indelible impact on the Australian burlesque scene, but beyond that, he is a dear friend of mine, and I've known him for a long, long time. And he is the reason why the Bump and Grind podcast exists. And you'll hear that story in our chat. But please welcome to the Bump and Grind, Russell Beattie. Russell, I am very thrilled to have you on the Bump and Grind today, a podcast which would not exist if you had not forced me to do it. So thank you.
My pleasure, Angie Pontani.
No, I was laughing because I was like, oh my God, I remember when we talked in the beginning of the pandemic and you were like, what are you doing? And I said nothing. And you said, you should do a podcast. And I said, yeah, okay. And you said, you're not going to do it. And I said, yes, I'm going to do it. And then a week later, you were like, you're going to do this podcast. Let's get on a Zoom call. I have the team to put it together because I know you're not going to do it.
Yeah, I figured it'd be easy for you being married to a musician with all that microphones and everything laying around. But then I also realized I was talking to you.
Yeah, all the microphones that I don't even know how to plug in. It's a nightmare. But I have learned a lot on this journey, and I thank you for inspiring me to do it.
Yeah, I know. I didn't quite know what we were signing up for.
No, and I still don't know. It's very exciting, and it's fun.
It's been a fun journey, though.
No, it totally has. It's been absolutely amazing, and I have learned a lot. And I think one of the fun things, too, is like I've known you for, 745,000 years, right?
Since 2004.
And we met in Edinburgh at the Fringe Festival with the Whoopee Club.
Yes, I came and picked you up from the airport.
Yes, you picked us up from the airport, and you were there stage managing.
Yeah, that was the first big burlesque club I actually worked for, like burlesque scene, was the London scene. And that took a bit of work to get in with them. But the first kind of big thing I did was went to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival with them.
Why did it take a lot of work? Were they just like, we don't know you, you're not from around these parts, kid?
Yeah, well, pretty much how most people fall into a burlesque scene, they either know somebody or they take a class or they're kind of connected some way into it. I read about the Whoopee Club in this old magazine called Face, which is not around anymore. And every month they used to kind of, it was the hot thing in London. So when I moved to London, and I don't know if many people know this, but Australians don't have the best reputation in London. We go over there usually because we get a two-year work visa. So a lot of Australians go over there, New Zealanders and South Africans, and they kind of create their own little communities. And we're quite known for being on our worst behavior while we're over there a lot of the time. A lot of,
Shocking.
They have their own bars, they have their own shops, they have their own suburbs, And it's quite easy to fall into the trap because it's kind of set up so, you just hang out with other Australians and Kiwis and South Africans while you're over there. And I really wanted to get in with this club. And I think the first show I ever saw, burlesque show I ever saw was... it's kind of like their little birthday show, which wasn't a really big show. The only performer I remember seeing quite clearly is a Modesty Blaze.
Wow, yeah.
So that was the first introduction to live burlesque for me.
That's a great introduction.
And then I spent 6 months trying to convince them to let me come and help out and work with them. And
they weren't having it.
Didn't get anything back at all. I kind of gave up all hope, even kind of working with them, and I was about to come over to the States to teach at a summer camp. And just weirdly, they wouldn't give me a visa into the States. And I spent all my money on tickets and everything. It was non-refundable to get over there. So I was broke. I had no money. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't have a house at the end of the week. I was working on a farm out about 3 hours outside of London doing hard labour, 6 days a week, living in a caravan with a bunch of Czech and Slovakian kind of guys. And then and then I got a weird email one day just saying, hey, we're going to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. Do you want to come in and have a chat about coming to work with us? And it was kind of like, I think it was the same day I got rejected from the visa. I was freaking out, and I came out, didn't know what my next move was. And then I got this weird email inviting me to come to Edinburgh. And then I met with Lara and Tamara, and, they kind of got a sense that I was there to work and not just party. And then, we went on this wild ride, and I've kind of been doing it ever since.
That was quite an introduction then, because that was a totally wild ride. And I remember you picked us up at the airport. The airport lost our go-go boots. We were supposed to do a show that night, and we were literally sitting backstage with no shoes. And we were thinking, are we going to break one of the cardinal rules of our performance, Bible, and dance with no shoes on?
And no
that
spears.
Would be so sad. Yeah. Oh, God. That would be terrible. And then you came through. You were like the knight in shining armor with our boots.
Yeah, I remember it took a fair bit because it was also your boots, and I think it was one of your other acts. You had spears as well.
Oh, yeah.
So it was three of your acts were affected, so you had no backup.
Yeah. No, that's right. That's right. We had lost I think one of our whole trunks went missing. So you saved us with that. And then you saved us because didn't we have an interview and we got lost and we were just wandering around?
You had a photo. I believe you had a photo shoot with because that was the year Burlesque came to the Fringe, so it was the hot ticket in town. You had you guys, Leclerc, Wawa Sisters, and you kind of were all doing this big Burlesque photo shoot with the local paper. And I remember I was there and the Wawa Sisters are getting their photos done, and they had to be shocked because you guys were nowhere to be seen. And then out of nowhere, I said, let me see if I can go find them, because you guys had no cell phones or anything. And I remember just going down this random street, and I see these three short burlesque performers freaking out. You and Tara kind of yelling at each other. I'm like, guys, over here.
And I think we were in our Wild West outfits or something absolutely ridiculous to add to the scenery.
Yeah, but it's during the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, so there's nothing too wild or crazy there.
It's not that shocking.
No. But yeah, we did that show. I think we did that show every night at midnight for 5 to 6 weeks or something like that. It was a crazy time. It was
crazy.
That's when burlesque was still in its, their revival, at least in its infancy, where people were still kind of figuring out what it was. So you had a lot of, performance artists, singers, usually people who were a little bit older, who didn't go in there with a clear idea of what they wanted to achieve. It just was this umbrella kind of form of entertainment, which kind of everyone was coming in. And with the Whoopee Club, it was so unique, and it's probably like New York. You got people from around the world coming there. So it's such an international place to kind of perform and be a part of.
Well, and also there was such an excitement because going to Fringe felt so legitimate, and this was the first time that acts like ours were coming there and being exposed to that crowd, and it just felt so cool. I remember thinking this is it, and I've thought that 50 times in my career, but I was like, this is definitely it. We're making it now.
Yeah, well, for me, I felt like when I did it, it was because growing up, I grew up in Australia in quite a coastal community, small community where nothing, alternative really takes place. It's all very kind of mainstream Australian. And it was the first time I could say, so you can be different. You can be weird. You can be crazy. You can do it every day. It can just be part of who you are. You don't have to wait for a special occasion.
Was that what it was that appealed to you? Because what was your train? Well, first of all, I just do have one question that I think is probably burning everybody's mind. What were you going to teach summer camp in America? What was going to be your area of expertise?
I was actually teaching filmmaking at the summer camp.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So your background was in film. You went to college for film. This is what you studied.
Yeah, that was my first passion. It still carries through to that.
What aspect? Cinematography? Directing?
Directing and producing is where kind of my natural skills lay, like organization and just kind of knowing I can see the end game pretty clearly most of the time with whatever I work on. So I usually go straight to the point with what I want, and that usually lends itself to directing or producing or something along those lines. But basically, I do anything what needs to be done to get the job done when we create. But yeah, film's always my first passion, but it's not my only passion, and I still do film stuff to this day. But burlesque, my first introduction to burlesque probably was when I was about 4 or 5, I think. And I didn't really know the difference because I remember seeing like Singing in the Rain, Gene Kelly performing at a burlesque on a burlesque stage, and
yeah, for sure.
Obviously things like Gypsy and all that. But I remember when I was like 4, my cousin had a 21st birthday party, and they used to do it in the backyard, and they had a big bonfire, and I just remember sneaking down there in the backyard where all the men were, and they had a stripper, as you would at a 21st. And I just remember seeing this
of course.
naked woman stripping, walking, like dancing around this bonfire, and kind of left a impact on me. So that always kind of associated like, this very dramatic and theatrical aspect to, the naked form.
Yeah,
and
of course.
As I got older, I was like really into like, circus, carnivals, freak shows, and things like that. I even ran away when I was about 8 to try and join the circus at my local thing. But they rang my mum and got me. She came.
Yeah, you're a little too young, a little too early at 8.
But I still held that candle. And then as I got older, I was researching burlesque, my teens quite a lot, and I have a massive collection of burlesque memorabilia when no one was into it, so it was really easy to buy.
And this is like the late 90s, right?
Late 90s.
I mean, like, this is when it's starting to bubble, or at least the swing scene in the States is bubbling. So was there any of that seeping in Australia at the time?
I have no idea. I really don't, because I was in a bubble.
Because you were a child?
Yeah, I was in a bubble. I do know now that there was definitely clubs, like there's definitely people in Sydney who are doing it. It might have been called burlesque, but the entertainment format was still happening, And you had clubs like Burlesque in Australia who started definitely, I think, in the late 90s, and that was more of a lesbian-driven or female strip show kind of thing. And you definitely had, like, pioneers, like, from the old days, like Elizabeth Burton, and we also had the Tivoli circuit and all that. So
yes,
we just didn't. Might not have called it burlesque, but there was still the same kind of entertainment. It might not be as broady as the American style, but we definitely had elements of it, and we always had a very strong sideshow and circus aspect in Australia. A lot of our performers went overseas, especially in the 90s, and you'd have things come out like the Jim Rose Circus, which had elements of it and things like that. So it was definitely that type of entertainment. It just, I don't know if we actually called it burlesque or not. And
yeah, well, we weren't either, really, at that point. Even nobody really was yet, but it was a collective unconscious, of course, that was out there. But it visually always appealed to you.
Yeah, and I was really into sideshow, like really into like freaks and things like that, Well,
they meld very nicely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and my favorite guy was a guy called Jojo the Dog-Faced Boy, who had who suffered, or not did suffer, but he had the condition of hypertrichosis, where he grows a lot of hair all over his body. There's, if you look up Dog-Faced Boy or Wolfman or stuff like that. And he was really interesting, but I read somewhere in this, it was actually proved not to be true, but I read somewhere that his last gig was MC in a house of burlesque. I was like, I know that word. And this was when I was about 15. And then that's when I started getting into burlesque there as a study and a theory and all that. But it was just something cool. It was like pin-up. It was like swing. It was like, everyone has those phases, punk, all that kind of stuff. It's just, but I got into all these like little things at the time. But then when the resurgence happened in London and the US, I was getting exposed through these like magazines. And I was like, oh man, if I ever get over there, I want to be a part of that. And that's what kind of led to it. But yeah, that all kind of, all that stuff didn't really feel like I was just focusing on any one thing. It was just an extension of like, film and the books I was into and pop culture and all that. They all kind of were in one big bag for me.
And don't you think that the scene at that time, so you go to London, you find out about the Whoopee Club, you're going to these shows, like, I think when you kind of, like, think of burlesque in retrospect in the 40s and the 50s, it always had the underbelly, but it had a, like, really glamorous air to it as well. But I felt like when the resurgence was happening, at least here in the States, it was so gritty. It was so sideshow. Like, they really were hand in hand. Was that the vibe that was happening in London as well when you were finally old enough to go to a club and see what was going on?
Yeah, well, London was interesting because I found, like, burlesque has become very, I don't know if the right word is, not, I don't want to say something like gentrified or anything, but it's like a lot of the performers in each country, they obviously they're all different, but, it feels very similar, Back in the day, like, LA felt very different to New York. New York felt very different to London. They didn't really have a lot of outside influence, so they all kind of developed their own style, so to speak. And just in London, you're performing in some venues that are like hundreds of years old, built by the Masons. And
yeah, totally.
It's all just kind of hidden. You got all this history, but then you got that kind of class system over there. So you have the lower class giving it to the upper class, and the upper class being quite want to be a part of the underclass, so there's this kind of melding of different classes as well, and it's very interesting. I was exposed to it, and like I said, like I thought I was going to be the only kind of Australian amongst the scene, but I met probably about 3 or 4 other people in that scene, but that scene was huge. Wasn't just the Whoopee Club, they were like the ones who call themselves like the hardcore burlesque kind of club. And that's when those kind of scenes emerge where it's not just the club, but it's everything else around that, what kind of emerge, and that was very exciting to be a part of. Every night of the week I was doing burlesque there at one point, because there was corporates and everyone wanted to be a part of it. After parties for like the Rolling Stone and Stones and all that kind of stuff. So it was really interesting.
Oh no, totally. It was the same thing here where it just started to get hot. It started to pick up steam. It still had like the underbelly of like the gutter and the glitter, but it was like getting all those big private parties, celebrities coming to the show. It was like this beautiful moment. I think before, like you said, not I don't want to say gentrified, but I feel like a lot of it has to do with like the emergence of social media and the impact that that's had on things where we have so much accessibility to each other. When it started, you couldn't go on YouTube and watch, Immodesty Blaze's full number. Now I can go and see everything, and I think that influence kind of ekes into people, don't you think?
Yeah, well, when I first saw Immodesty, I just thought every burlesque performer was like that, because she was the first one I saw, and I was comparing her to like the classics, like Lily St. Cyr, and I didn't realize that Immodesty is probably the best tassel twirler in the world at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just one of those things where I got exposed to a very high level, and it was right at the right time where I often use that term where the party's at. It's that thing where it's like, where's the party? Where's the best party at? And at that time, burlesque was the best party, and I'm looking at it through nostalgia lenses here. So I could be amping it up a lot more than what it was. But for me, and where my headspace was at the time, it was the most exciting place you could be. I didn't want to be anywhere else.
Well, no, I think we all look at it through nostalgic lenses, but I also think when a scene and an art form is emerging, there are like liberties and wildness and crazy things that are happening that will never happen again, because we're all, figuring it out, and nobody really knew what to do or who was going to do what, and it kind of created this super raw energy, I think, that led to some amazing moments that can never be created, because now we know, Now you have to really think, like, what can I do that's different? What can I do that's going to blow everybody's mind? Or is this person did this person did that? It's not the same playing field. From that moment that you saw Immodesty Blaze and you're like, whoa, okay, this is something. Could you have possibly imagined that, 20 years later, this would be a huge part of your career?
I often tell
it wasn't an option of thought, really.
No. And I look back at it because I'm not a believer in fate or anything like that. But when I got denied the visa, that was just a pivot point in my whole life. Because if I got that visa, I would have never gone to Edinburgh and I would have never done burlesque, And we would have never met. And this podcast would have never happened, and you would be teaching film at a summer camp. Yeah, still to this day. I suppose what drew me to burlesque and why I still stay there, even though I've worked in the film industry and done a whole bunch of other stuff, I always come back to burlesque because the immediacy of it and the excitement there and the control is always very exciting, you know. But it wasn't enough to kind of sustain me. I had to kind of constantly evolve what I was doing in burlesque. Otherwise, I find if like burlesque is really, unless you evolve as a performer, it's really for new people. I find, like, I do think, you know, you either have to keep pushing yourself. If you become static in burlesque or tread water, you shouldn't be there.
Yeah. No, of course. But you know, you say you always think about the end game. You always look and you see the full picture. So you're at the Whoopee Club, you're getting in the door as a stage manager, you see a modesty blaze. Was your first thought, like, I got to stick in this, I'm going to get a show together, I'm going to start building out these big shows? I mean, what you ultimately did and have done to just keep adding on all these elements, was that your plan? When you saw a modesty, when you see these shows happening, when you realize the revival is kicking up the steam, was that where your mindset was at? Like, I'm going to build out shows as soon as I can.
A little bit. Like, I started, as soon as I was part of it, just my natural kind of creative streak, I just started creating acts. Doesn't mean we pulled it, like, actually did them, but I just started creating acts and, like, my little sketchbook, drawing up acts and da-da-da-da-da.
For other people to do, because you never wanted to be a performer,
Never
right?
wanted to be a performer.
So these were acts for other people. Like, you'd be like, oh, this girl should do this. This would be fun if this guy did this.
Yeah, I could see where people needed help. And there's obviously there's a learning curve when you're performing. And I thought, well, if I have an objective opinion, I could help speed up that learning curve, you know? And some performers, you know, they were focusing on certain aspects, and I was just thinking, oh man, if they just did this a little bit differently, and, you know, I was seen as, you know, being a director, you know, so to speak. But the Whoopee Club wasn't mine, you know, so I felt like I couldn't really contribute more than what I was doing, you know. I did help out as much as I could, and I became quite close with Lara and Tamara in the time I was with them, just, you know, helping out where I could. And I think one of the last jobs we were working on, I never actually got to stay there to see it, but they were working on this big synchronized swimming kind of burlesque event. And to me, that was miles ahead of anything I was seeing happening around the world in the scene. So I think those girls were super progressive. And people like Marissa Koneski and all that, they're all part of the same kind of scene, you know?
Yeah.
So I was just surrounded by all these, like, really amazing women who were just, you know, doing behind the scenes and on stage, and, you know, and they're just making it work, you know. It was a hot mess a lot of the times, but that was kind of added to it, and I think that just goes along with burlesque. And if you lose a little bit of that danger and excitement that it could all go wrong, it stops being burlesque and it becomes, you know, rehearsed theatre show, you know. You kind of need that knife's edge energy, you know. And
no, totally.
Yeah, so I knew I wanted to work on something and do something. So when I returned back to Australia, it just happened to be at the time where a whole bunch of like-minded people kind of started doing the revival, which was around about 2005. That's when Australia.
So there was burlesque bubbling there.
Oh yeah, it was just a matter of time.
In Sydney.
Not only Sydney, Brisbane, Melbourne, Perth. Like, you had these little hubs. Like Brisbane, we had a performer, Lola the Vamp, who was kind of running it up there, and she's famous for getting a PhD in burlesque.
Yes, I remember Lola. She did something in toe shoes.
Yeah. She has a very Victorian kind of style, like very slow,
around like a maypole.
Yeah, and all that kind of stuff. Then in Sydney, you had a lot of little groups coming up, like duos and trios and clubs, and we all kind of banded together under this one venue called 34B. Which was quite exciting. This is like different promoters took it over every Friday night. But I met a couple of people in London who also came back to Australia, and we started a burlesque group called Sugar Time, which was basically an Australian version of the Whoopee Club in the beginning before it kind of evolved into its own thing. But for us, we had to, like, create burlesque performers. I was going up to people in bars, like girls and guys in bars, and going, when I was drunk, going, hey, have you ever danced before? And, like, just asking random people if they had the right look, you know. So we actually.
So you were casting.
We were literally casting because there wasn't that many burlesque performers around. And then Melbourne.
And how did people respond to it? Like, if you went up to somebody and said that to somebody in a bar at that point in time, they likely didn't even know what it meant, right?
Yeah, you get kind of intuitive and, like, some people, like you can kind of tell by their look that they would know. They've definitely got something going on. They're part of the rockabilly
Did you get
scene.
any of your long haulers? Like, because you've been
Yes.
working with a lot of the same people for years. Did you meet anybody, like, by walking up to them in a bar that's still working with you now?
No, because I've also, a lot of people don't work with me as well. Because, as you know, I've got a very hard way of directing. If it's not
You're not
everyone's
for
cup
the
of tea.
faint of heart.
So, Gypsy Wood, I met her in a bar.
Oh, yeah.
And she's still performing to this day, not with me, but she still performs to this day. Like a guy called Anthony Howes, who doesn't do burlesque outside of my shows, but I met him when he was 17, and I've used him probably almost 20 years now in different things, and I still got, some long haulers who I just went up into in bars or I saw in the street or something like that. If they had the right energy and I thought there was something there, it's a little bit different.
That's fun, though. That creates a good energy.
Yeah, but it didn't have to last for too long. Like, pretty soon, burlesque was in full swing. Within a year, we had performers coming out of the woodwork everywhere. So,
But what was the vibe? Like, because you say, like, at this point in time, you still had that thing where it was like LA had a style, New York had a style, New Orleans had a style, Italy started coming out with its own style. What was the style, like the natural emergence of like that Australian vibe at that point, if you could pinpoint it?
Yeah, well, it was weird. It was a mixture of like the queer scene in Sydney, because that was probably the most progressive in terms of like from the drag culture right through to more of the queer burlesque scene. They were a big influence, a part of it. There was artists, there was like students, there was musicians that didn't really find a place in live music, but they found a place in burlesque. It was just a weird mix, which is what I loved, and I tried to foster, because I did see that with Whoopee Club, and I tried to emulate a little bit of what they did. A lot of it was just friends who I called in. I was like, hey, I need you to do this. I need you to do this. Melbourne had an interesting going on. They had more like troops. I didn't even know if there was that many solo. Like, you had the Voodoo Trash Dolls, who were like a very kind of Suicide Girls inspired kind of group. You had like Man's Ruin, which was definitely out of the rockabilly scene, but more like and then you had also things like Highball Burlesque, which was very kind of 50s inspired, very strict old-fashioned burlesque. And
I remember, though, when you brought me over the first time, and we'll get into that later because it's a little down the story path. But I remember, like, the vibe, and not necessarily in Sydney, but I remember when we traveled to other places, like, there was, like, almost like a little bit of an innocence, like in Perth and Brisbane. And I remember, like, people were shocked when they saw how small my thongs were.
Yeah, well, they're a little bit in bubbles because Perth is, like, the most isolated city in the world.
Yeah, they all had like underpants on, and I remember they were like, "Wait, what?"
Yeah, or even us, like we turned up the heat a bit, probably about a year and a half in. I was getting over doing all the cutesy stuff because I felt like I'd been there and done that. So I wanted to kind of go with more high concept kind of driven shows. And that's where we started incorporating like more rock bands and things like that. And I think it was around probably about a year before you came out was when my scene and a few of the other people around our scene started amping it up a bit. But
And the audience was there for it. The audience was into it. They weren't scared. I mean, they're Australians. You guys are all crazy.
Yeah, well, there's always plenty of booze at our gigs, so...
Listen, to this day, Australia is one of my favorite audiences. You guys like to party. They're wild. They're so fun.
Yeah, and that was the thing. It was a little bit hard to kind of, because we don't have natural scenes in Australia. Our scenes are quite small because we're a small population. So our rockabilly scene is very small compared to other cities. Our swing scene's probably even smaller. All the traditional scenes were the early adopters of burlesque, traditionally, like, the queer scene, the punk scene, and all that kind of thing. They were just so small. So we had to kind of make ours, still keep it alternative, but make it a little bit more mainstream just to kind of get those audiences if we want to grow.
Yeah. So that's what you were doing then with the Sugar Time show. You were like pushing it a little bit, right? You were at 34B. Is that where you were doing it?
We started at 34B, and then we kind of jumped out from there. And we kind of, our big thing we did was kind of, it was also probably one of the things what ended Sugar Time a little bit as well, because it's just a big undertaking for what we did, is we wanted to do something what brought the scene together like Edinburgh did for the Whoopee Club. And so we decided to do a national tour. And we didn't have enough money or enough experience to do a national tour, but we did it anyway because that's what you do. Ignorance is the best motivator.
But you learn so much when you do that.
You do. So we did this show called the Absinthe Club, and we did a national tour, and a national tour of Australia is maybe like 6 cities. You know, and in between each city is like anywhere from 9 to 12 hours or whatever.
So what was the show like? What was the build of the show? Like, what was the vibe? Because I know you don't just do like, oh, okay, here's some performers and a stage, and I hope you have lights.
No,
so,
we had like projection elements. We had pantomime. We had barbershop quartets. We had, we wanted to bring every major burlesque performer in Australia onto one bill, like a traveling festival, so to speak. And we had basically all these acts, what I created, mixed with all the kind of ring-ins, what we brought in, all the other burlesque performers.
And how did performers react to you creating their acts? They were totally into it, right? Because they had been
No,
cold.
it was a slow kind of transition, because I don't look like your average kind of burlesque creator.
Well, right. And if you're going to do the act, you want to trust the source that it's coming from.
Exactly.
So it's kind
and
of
I'm
like,
not,
oh God,
I'm
am I going
not
to
a
listen
dancer.
to this guy? And
I'm not a dancer or anything. But they all saw that I worked. And that was the big thing. And that's where the respect comes from, because I actually do what I say I'm going to do most of the time. And we took 45 people on the road.
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, so we took 45 performers on the road.
How's that even possible? Did you have a bus?
Yeah, we had buses. And we toured
Russell,
buses. And,
are you still paying for this tour?
No. We managed to knock this tour off really cheap. It was the cheapest tour I've ever done, to tell you the truth.
Oh my God!
But yeah, we took 45 people on the road, and it was crazy. And we took like props and sets and all this crazy stuff.
How long was the show?
Live band. We had probably close to 2.5, 3 hours with 2 intermissions.
Oh my God!
And picked totally the wrong venues to do it in and all that kind of stuff. But it was a learning curve. And then I realized, okay, I don't really need everyone in Australia, because it's just, I was trying to emulate the fun I had in Edinburgh. But now I'm running things, so I didn't have any fun. It was always just solving problems and putting out fires.
Yeah,
and,
of course.
That put a lot of stress on my relationship with my business partners then, who are Cass and Ben. And, they were great, but we were kind of growing apart as kind of creatives, I had a very singular vision, and I didn't want to include that many people trying to achieve it, because it just was a lot harder, to kind of make everyone happy. So I just said, well, I think I'll just focus on trying to tell one kind of show. And then I think my next show after that was, if you want to use this as a segue, was Good Drugs, Bad Women, the first time I brought you out to Australia.
Okay, so what year are we in right now?
That'd be 2007, I think. Good Drugs, Bad Women.
So that was the next tour that you did after this 45-person insanity mission?
Yeah, but that was only like half a year later, because we ran regular Sugar Time clubs once a month or once every 6 weeks, pretty much for like 2 years. And then we did this big crazy tour, and then we had a few months off. And then we decided to put on a different show. And that was still branded Sugar Time, but I mainly did that with my new business partner, who I'm still currently with to this day, Craig. We started doing that as, honestly, a way to make a little bit of capital so we could put on a music festival. And just learn.
Wait, that was the inspiration behind the Good Drugs, Bad Women tour, to make money to put on a music festival?
Yeah, and learn a bit more about productions with bands and all that kind of stuff, because we put a band together. We actually created a band for
I remember.
those shows.
But wait, I want to pop back 1 second, Russell. So just to go back to the Absinthe tour, just in the history of the burlesque scene in Australia, the neo scene, this would be the first revival tour. Like this would have been the first show to kind of bring a national acts around Australia.
Yeah, definitely. We were, were quite progressive in trying to create the scene. And some people were a bit cagey. Like, they wanted to know what angle I was coming from, and they couldn't quite understand that I just wanted to kind of, what's good for the scene is good for me, that kind of thing. So, I'm sure there's still people to this day who always used to think I had an angle with all that stuff. But
well, you had an angle to do a good show.
Yeah, and honestly, it wasn't that great. It was good, but it was a big learning curve. There was just too much. I tried to do too much with it. And the show it was, as I said before, it was a hot mess, but...
Well, listen, being an editor of your own work is the hardest thing, I think. And when you go out, you want to create the best thing that you can. And that's really hard to do when you just want to throw everything in and everything in and everything in.
I was 22 at the time, or 23 at the time. So, and, having like close to 50 people looking at you for answers every day, it was like...
Oh, yeah.
That was a big learning curve for me.
So Good Drugs, Bad Women was the next tour that you did. And that's what you brought me over for. And this was the first thing that we had done together outside of the Fringe Festival. And this show...
prior to that, I actually came to the New York Burlesque Festival and worked there.
Oh, was that before that?
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Because we'll email friends after the Edinburgh Fringe.
Yeah.
But then, I said, I was coming to New York. He said, you can stay at mine. I said, oh, sure. Okay, that'll be great. And I remember getting there at 11 o'clock at night in this car, taking me to your house. I'm like, I actually don't really know Angie that well. I've only ever met her amongst the sisters. And I was going to go, this could be super weird.
Oh, but it wasn't weird at all, was it, Russell?
Do you really want me to tell stories, Angie?
No, I just want you to be quiet. The only thing you can say is I have 10 clocks in my house and none of them are set.
Okay, I'll leave the only story to that.
And then there's also the one where you stepped on a sewing pin and it went in your foot and you were just like, I was like, ah! And you were like, I stepped on a pin. And then you just pulled it out of your foot and it was disgusting, but you didn't care because you're Australian. So there's that one. But that's it.
All right, I won't say anything else.
Thanks, Russell. You're a gem. But you came over twice. You helped with the festival twice.
No, I only did the festival once, but we did 4 gigs, which I was stage managing.
Oh, yeah, you did them all.
Yeah, every day I met someone new from the scene, and it was funny. The first night, it was David Bishop, who I think he fell in love with me purely for the fact that I kind of knew what I was doing.
And it was very helpful because we had a lot of big props that year, and you were just like, where does this go? And picking it up and moving around. And
I think that night was the
stuff.
first time Scotty tried to pick me up.
Just the first?
Yeah, no, it's happened quite a bit. He always forgets who I am, and then he always comes up and says the same lines. And then I also did the big one, what we did in Times Square. We also did the Golden
Pasty Awards. Yeah, the Golden Pasty Awards. But I don't even remember the venues. That was so long ago.
That was on a boat.
Oh, yeah. That was the boat episode. That was terrible choice. But
yeah,
again,
it's great.
Live and learn.
Everyone in heels on a steamboat trying to dance and falling over.
Gypsy Wood doing foot juggling upside down on a rocking boat. But like your 45-person tour, you live and you learn.
But yeah, we had done that, and that's when we actually became friends because during Edinburgh it was just so kind of hectic.
Crazy.
And then after that, that's when, we brought you out for the first time for Good Drugs, Bad Women.
No, and that was great for me, too, because I had recently just gone solo, and that was really, my first big traveling, gig by myself, where I was just Angie Pontani, leaving those sisters behind, getting out on my own, and that was a great experience, and that was a great show, and that was the first time that I actually got to see all that you put into the shows. You had the set with the awesome, a projection of Lisa,
the window.
Tasia, go-go dancing in the window, and you had the band that you had created for the show, the Snowdroppers.
Yeah, and we also had Anthony, who I mentioned earlier, who had to run on quickly and do the MC bit because we projected we didn't have an MC. We projected everybody's intros, like a video kind of thing, very rock and roll kind of coming in. But your one for your final performance kind of stuffed up, and the projection didn't work. So Anthony had to go out. And Anthony, God love him, but he smokes a lot of weed. He couldn't remember your surname, so he just made it up.
Oh, I remember. I remember it started with a P though. He got
so he goes, for our final performance in front of 1,400 people. For our final performance, Angie. Thinking everyone will cheer and kind of he'd be able to kind of go under their cheers, but everyone was waiting till he finished saying it. So just
it's so terrible.
Showbiz.
Oh my god, no, it was hilarious. I can find humor in these things.
You kind of have to on that.
No, but that was a great tour, and so that was a success for you guys. Yes.
Yeah, definitely. It wasn't that big. We kind of only condensed it to a few shows, but it was very big audiences. I upgraded.
Yeah.
Like I took all the stuff I learnt from the Absinthe Club and applied it to that tour. So way better venues, better sight lines, better backstage, better lighting, only bringing performers on what I needed to kind of add value to the show. All the rest, I kind of created the acts for them and created the bands, and just having that level of control kind of validated what I was thinking at the time.
Well, and the audience had to validate that too, because like you said, these were huge venues. They were like 1,000+ venues, and they were packed.
They're about 1,500 each, kind of thing.
Yeah. No, that was great. Is that the one where you made me stay at a hostel that one night?
I don't know. Maybe. No, that was on a different tour, and I think you build that up way more. But I did. That was the tour. I got you a lovely little cottage with an outside bathroom. And it wasn't, the toilet wasn't outside. It was just the shower had a view of like this beautiful yard. But Angie, being from New York, thinks it's the wilderness.
Oh, it was terrifying. It was absolutely terrifying. And you know what? Yeah, I will say a normal person would probably say that was a lovely cottage. But I was just filled with horror. And I remember we would come home after the shows and I would make you walk me out to the shower and make sure there was no like killer spiders or snakes. And then wait for me in the cottage until I came back in because I was so scared.
Yeah, I kind of think that was a terrible decision, but also a fantastic decision at the same time.
I mean, yeah. Do you remember when I thought I killed a huntsman spider and it was just a daddy long legs?
Yeah.
I took a picture of it. I was like, I killed a huntsman spider.
I said, yeah, daddy long legs, they don't hurt you.
Yeah, if I saw a huntsman spider, I think I would probably be dead.
Huntsman spiders don't hurt you either.
I know, but I can't. I hurt myself when I see a spider. That's the problem. But it was cute, but that was terrifying to have to go outside. And the hostel, I know, it was cute too. And me and Lisa had our own room, but
No, it wasn't. That was just a mistake. I also had to stay there and I wasn't happy about it. So, that was just a mistake.
But it wasn't as bad as it is in the movies. There weren't backpackers.
No. Everyone had their own private rooms and private bathrooms and everything.
Well, I slept with Lisa anyway.
She's scarred by it. She will not let it go after many years.
Well, no, I'll never let it go. But that's what Brian always says. Like, your idea of roughing it is staying in a hotel without room service. I am listen, I can roll with the punches. I am very flexible. I can work in all environments, but I'm such a freaking princess when it comes to staying in places.
Really, Angie? Really?
Yeah. But come on, I can roll with it. I can perform anywhere. I will perform in an alley. I can do it. But, I am a bit of a princess. So when you were in America and you saw the kind of shows that we did here, were you like, wow, this is crazy. They don't have any sets and they're just like, somebody asked me for a cabaret chair at the New York Burlesque Festival. And I'm like, really? And you're like building these huge props and these huge sets and all this thing. Like, is it necessary?
No, it all comes down to who the performer is, and if they don't need them, they don't need them. That's the thing. With my shows, I suppose I started, and I know performers are probably not going to like this, but I started caring less about the performer and more about the audience's experience of the show. And at that point, I'd spend a lot of time building up performers to get them to a point where I felt like we worked together quite well, creating routines. But then they'll go and work for another promoter for quarter the pay. And using a lot of the skill sets they develop, what I invested in and whatnot. So I decided to develop the shows more than the performer, so I could just bring in different performers to perform the routines. Well,
as a director who's creating this content that kind of serves you a little bit better, because that's the one thing with burlesque too. It's like if you work in this spectrum where it's like I'm hiring this person to be a headliner and this person, you're creating a different package, you're creating a different presentation.
Well, in the early days with performers, I'd work with them. I'd create a concept. I'd give it to them. I'd pay for the costume and I'd give that to them, because I just wanted good performers to be out there. But then when like a lot of dodgy promoters were starting to come up through the scenes, people who were there for the wrong reasons, and they started just, going after everybody, and lying, and most of Australians know around that time who the promoters I'm talking about. And, to a point where one of them even went to one of your shows and said that they were your Australian producer, in New York.
Oh,
Yeah. And
yeah, somebody came to my show in New York and the manager of the venue came backstairs and said, "Your Australian producer's here." And I was like, "Russell?" And it was not you.
No. And that was just the thing. I just couldn't understand why so many people were lying and just didn't want to like put the work in themselves to develop, routines and acts and all that.
Yeah.
But then, performers would just go and perform those routines the next night for half the pay or quarter of the pay and all that kind of stuff. And I was just getting a bit disheartened by it all. So I think after Good Drugs, Bad Women, I stepped back a bit and focused on music. Not playing or anything, I'm not a musician, but the band I created, Snowdroppers, for Good Drugs, Bad Women, they had a great energy, and they kind of led me into a new scene what was developing, that kind of alternative blues country, which kind of was really popular around the 2007 to the 2015 kind of period.
And just to clarify, you brought them together. Like, you brought those guys together like Boys to Men or New Kids on the Block. You were like, I want you, and you play this, and you play this, and you play this, and you're going to wear this, and this is going to be your look, and this is going to be your style, right? You curated that situation.
Yeah, and I never used to like talking about it because everyone's got this kind of idea of manufactured bands like that. And they weren't manufactured. They wrote all their own music. The deal we had with them was, because at the time we were just creating a band for a burlesque show. And I knew Paul, who was the guitarist from when we were teenagers on the Central Coast, where we grew up. And he brought in a friend of his who became the lead singer, Jeremy, and then they knew another guy who they went to uni with. And then the swing dancer in my show, he said he played drums. And I told the band, you have to use him because I'm not paying for another drummer to come on tour when he can do it.
Yeah.
And that's how they kind of formed. And they just it just happened, and they just started writing great music straight off the bat. And we felt like we had something special, and we wanted to keep that going. And we just thought it was way easier and cheaper to tour bands than big burlesque shows. Because bands there's just more of a system in place for them to tour more venues, and there's more of a structure.
Less needs.
Exactly. Not really. Musicians have just as many
Depends.
needs. Yeah. But but yeah, and that kind of, because they had like that relationship where I said to them, you guys just have to write and play music. I'll take care of everything else. And they agreed to that. So myself and Craig, my business partner, we kind of almost became like fifth and sixth members of the band, in the shadows. And we had them for 5 years, and we did really good with them. We took them to South by Southwest. We paid big festivals. When we left them, they were doing, 1,500 capacity venues, headlining. They were getting paid, $10,000 a show kind of thing, for Australian bands.
Yeah, they got huge. They were huge.
Considering they got zero radio play, it was all just off fan base and word of mouth and whatnot. And they did it very quickly. Like, within a year, they were headlining their own shows and whatnot, and they kind of were the leaders of the scene as far as hitting the benchmarks. And then everyone else kind of
I remember when I came back and we went to go see their show, and it was packed and people were dancing and they knew all their songs, and it was just like, it was a vibe. It was a scene. They were like the kings.
Yeah, and I kind of felt like the closest thing I felt like with the Whoopee Club. Like,
yeah,
I didn't really have that with Sugar Time, because Sugar Time I was always working and I couldn't actually enjoy it, And it also felt like I was living in the shadow of something I already had done with the Whoopee Club, And I love Sugar Time. I had a great time there and I learned so much. But it was kind of like high school. You've done it, you don't want to go back. But
no,
with the Snowdroppers, it was new, it's exciting. And I managed to create another band which didn't quite work in the same method. And I said, well, then I realized you couldn't just reproduce what we had. It was a unique situation. And I give it credit to the boys. They they made the band popular. I helped, but they're the ones who are on stage and, killing it.
Yeah, of course. But I think what you and Craig bring to the table so much, which is so important, and so many artists don't think this all the way through, is like the presentation of everything, not just visually from the look and the style to the lights and the set, but even like the promotional materials and like the videos that you guys put out. Like, and I think that probably comes from your film background, and Craig is just like this genius too. And it's like together you guys really supported them to give them that presentation and those visuals in a world where visual travels so far with the internet and pictures.
It was the right time. It was
media.
like social media was just kicking off at that time.
Yeah.
Like Facebook and everything. And we just put the extra effort in to kind of make sure everything they put out served a purpose. Even if it didn't really serve a purpose, it still served a purpose in creating that the band felt bigger than what they actually were when they weren't that big.
Yeah.
And you got to know the band and you want to be friends with the band. And that's a big part of what musicians are now, with daily kind of Instagram stories and all that kind of stuff. We're doing things like that to kind of get across the sense of the band without even seeing them. And having just a very strong visual presence. We learned things from like, Tom Waits, the Ramones, the Cramps, bands like that, which just have this amazing visual presence, and you kind of want to know more about them purely based on how they look. You don't even need to listen to
because they look fun.
Yeah.
It looks like somebody, like you said, you want to be friends with, you want to go to the show, you want to hang out backstage.
Totally. And and that kind of, that kind of let us in. We managed them, and we also took on another artist, Mojo Juju. And we managed them for a while. And through that, we kind of learned a lot about the music industry, And that's my first taste where I was kind of saying that. And anytime I've kind of worked in an industry, I haven't really enjoyed it. I just like kind of creating stuff for our own audience. And, I kind of just reminded me, because we did the whole thing. We signed to a record label. We hated the record label. We had to buy it. We bought out our contract. We did every cliche you could imagine.
I remember hearing the stories.
And to the point that we almost, the guy who ran the record label, we absolutely hated. And at one point, we were going to literally take a ad out in the local music magazine, like the industry professional magazine, and put a bounty on his ponytail.
Oh, no!
But then our lawyer at the time really told us not to do it.
Probably a wise choice. Very creative vengeance scheme, but
but that's the piss and vinegar you have when you're in your 20s. You don't give a shit. It's more about principle.
Yes, absolutely. But what? And then you left them. Do they still exist?
No, what the next step was, because what happened was one of the venues we loved to play with the Snowdroppers was a small little venue called the Vanguard. And we did gigs there for like 2 years, and that was kind of like a home for us,
in Newtown.
Yeah.
Yes. So cute.
So when that went on the market, the owners were selling it. We didn't think it would have a chance in hell, but we ended up getting enough money together and we bought it.
And you had done several shows there at that point.
Yeah, we had probably done about 8 or 10 shows there. But we also went there a lot. It was like a hang for us as well. And so we bought that music venue, and while we still had these acts, so they became like, for the first 3 years, that was their regular venue, and everyone in that scene, all the other bands who were in that scene, that was their Sydney home. So it became like a headquarters of like a scene, become quite friendly with everybody. But around about, I want to say around about 2013, 2014, we parted ways with the Snowdroppers. It's just, you just grow apart as, I also have, the more validated I got back then, the more I was, knew what I did was right, for me at least. Not all my ideas are right, but like I felt quite validated, and any pushback I had, I'd get quite argumentative about, and just say, well, no, that's the way it's happening, And the boys didn't want to be they wanted to grow, and they wanted to have a bit more control over their image and all that kind of stuff and whatnot. I get it. But yeah, it just wasn't the right fit anymore. And also I was kind of sick of making everyone else kind of, successful or famous. Like no one even knew about Craig and I, because we hid from any kind of limelight at that point.
Right.
Which is fine. But I wanted, instead of trying to make someone else look like, put my ideas through someone else's in someone else's image, we just said, well, let's just start working on our own stuff from then on.
Right.
And
Almost similar to what you were saying with the burlesque in the early days of giving established performers these acts that they would then take and then can use on their own to make your own product that you can continue to grow. But you skipped over a lot at the Vanguard. When did you buy the Vanguard? 2010?
Yeah, 2010.
2010. And so then, but you started, you were still doing burlesque shows. Like you did the whole food series, the like hot lunch, the whipped cream for breakfast, like God, what were the rest of
when I was doing the Snowdroppers, because how old was I? I was about 26 then. When I was doing the Snowdroppers, I had a break from burlesque because I was just really jaded by what the scene was kind of becoming. Mm-hmm. No fault to anyone. It was just, I just felt like it wasn't developing. It was just kind of hit this moment where it wasn't going anywhere, you know. Everyone's just doing the same stuff, and new people would come in and they go through the same cycle as the previous performer generation before them, da-da-da-da-da. And I didn't know what I could contribute to it anymore. So I focused on the music. But then I was doing these corporate shows, and they had budgets, you know. But I was like, this is some of my best burlesque work I've ever done, you know? So then, yeah, we said, okay, how about we do like a run of shows? Because that's the only way where we'll do a small venue where I can control it. We're there for multiple nights and we do a run. And we're like, where are we going to do it? Well, let's do it at the Vanguard. Mm-hmm. So we created this food series, which started with you and ended with you. Like, so there was 4 different runs. And that was the first time I ever did a dinner and show because I was really anti-dinner and show. I hated that idea of doing
but why? It's so perfect. Why do you hate it?
Oh, it's so
cliche, senior citizen.
Yeah, so adult contemporary, you know? We're punk rock. You know, we didn't want to be that
adult
guy.
Contemporary does not sound sexy.
Yeah, and so we didn't really want to do it. But then we go, how can we make this interesting? How can we do it? You know, can we theme the food? Can we do all this? And then once I got inspired, it kind of took off. So we did, the first one was Sin for Breakfast. The second one was Hot Lunch. Third one, All You Can Eat. And the fifth one, Whipped Cream and Other Delights. Now, if some of those names sound familiar, it's because we repurposed old, like, you know, erotica paperbacks or, you know, vinyl albums or, you know, and we recreated the artwork of all of them to kind of give this new context. And we were still creating performers at that point, like still working with new performers, but also we brought out you just kick it off to kind of, you know, we're like, what if you saw Angie, how she naturally performs in an intimate space, you know, where she, you know, that's where her craft is really sharp. So that's what we did. We brought you out. And the way we subsidized that is we didn't want to tour it. So we kind of got you gigs in other cities, you know, and that's what kind of made it work. So I think that's when you went to New Zealand for the first time. I think we did a corporate around that time as well. Like, that week
we did. It was that, like, I was the Vegas representative,
You're the Vegas representative
of, like, the Las Vegas Board of Tourism that I was, like, going. And you were like, do you think you could be the Las Vegas tourism representative? I was like, yeah, for sure.
I said, have you done anything in Vegas before, Angie?
Yeah, I had. I said, I love Vegas. So we went around and I would give talks and, like, Q&As and play games with the audience. But that funded the whole thing to do these other shows.
That's the thing. We brought him out for that. So I think in that week alone, because I also had like Snowdroppers gigs at the same time. I think in that like 8-day period, I had 11 shows on.
It was crazy because I remember it was like a short trip. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to Australia for like 8 days. It's going to be insane. I'm going to die when I come home.
And New Zealand.
Yes, and New Zealand. I had fun in New Zealand. That was a great trip. Oh my God, I went to that strip club, the White House, with all American presidents' pictures on the walls, and I stayed up all night long. Yep, that was fun.
But yeah, that was, so yeah, we kind of, you know, we didn't really know what our next phase of burlesque was, and those food series kind of helped develop that. And that's where I really started working closely with Lisa, aka Tasia.
Yeah.
Who's been performing with us since 2006, I think.
Absolutely.
But that's where we kind of started really kind of working together because she started being more of a solo artist at that point because she was in a troupe before then.
She was in the Belladonna's Deluxe. Did you have anything to do with them getting formed, or were they like one of the things that was happening?
they were one of the other promoters at 34B. And they're their own thing, but then they kind of came under the Sugar Time wing when we got bigger. So they were kind of very instrumental in the Absinthe Club and Good Drugs, Bad Women and things like that. So they started doing almost every one of our shows because they were at a level what we thought we were at the same time. Like they kind of strive to always be a bit better than what was happening around them.
No, I remember very clearly. They did super cute choreographed numbers. They were all dancers.
They had a dance background, and that was a big part. And that's where I saw the difference of having like trained dancers do stuff as well. So Lisa kind of came in and, she became a headliner for a few years. And then as we kind of opened it up, she started choreographing my ideas with performance. So actually coming up with the choreography and whatnot. So if Craig is like my right hand, Lisa's kind of my left, in the kind
How did you help performers choreograph pre-Lisa? Because Lisa's a dancer. She's amazing. Like, how did you help them choreograph when it was just you?
Very badly.
I would have loved to have seen that.
Me rolling around on the floor trying to show them
No,
to be sexy.
Russell, no.
Yeah,
really?
yeah. A few people have seen me do it before. But I'd usually have a bunch of like anchor moves. So I go, at this point you want to do this, at this point you want to do this.
Right.
And then I'd lean on their natural kind of abilities to fill in the gaps, It's a relationship. It's a dance, And as I say, when I work with performers, I go, it's a conversation, I might be the person who comes up with a topic and mainly driving the conversation, but you still got to add to the conversation. Otherwise, it's a lecture, So
I just think the way you talk and like speaking to you and knowing you, it's like burlesque is such a free form art. There are really no hard rules or directives. But over the years, one of the things that I have learned is like you have the mind of a director. It is important when you create an act, even if you don't have somebody who can do that for you to take a step back and look at it and make sure there is a story and make sure there is a journey and make sure that it makes sense. Even if it's just you dancing around on the stage, it has to build and have an ebb and a flow. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. And I do think that is the unique perspective you bring, having such a director brain.
Also, I'm very different as a director because I'm also my own stage manager. Like I'm next to the performer on stage most of the time, or behind them, behind the curtain, or just off to the side, and I can feel the audience. And everyone goes, "Why don't you watch your own shows?" I go, "I don't need to. I can feel it. I like being on stage in the show and feeling when something doesn't work or feeling when something does work." I'm a very active kind of creator in that sense.
Well, that's where you feel it the most on stage. It's like, if they're not enjoying it, 1 minute can feel like an eternity from hell.
Totally. And, I very rarely do small shows anymore. So when something doesn't work, it's usually 2,000 people letting me know.
And it's tragic. But at this point, so you've got the Vanguard now, you're doing your food series. It's the 2010s. The scene has changed a lot in Australia from when you first started doing burlesque shows, then took a little break, and then came back to it. Were you pleased with where the scene had gone? Were you seeing new performers in Australia that you liked and were into and hiring?
Honestly,
besides Lisa?
Honestly, that's when I decided I kind of was going to leave the scene. And I'm not saying that as a negative.
So that's a no.
Yeah. No, the scene, like everyone talks about burlesque industry, and I don't find there's that much of an industry in burlesque. There's not like a standardized rate of pay. There's not, proper insurances and things like that. So at that point I said, okay, if I'm going to still do burlesque, I'm going to make it a tad more professional for me. And that's not a critique on performers. It's a critique on promoters.
Well, there's a difference between a scene and an industry.
Exactly.
And I look at burlesque as show business, and show business is the industry. So within that industry, you can, take it where you want to take it.
Yeah, but I just found promoters had to kind of, because these performers would spend a lot of time picturing their act, and they go, they have strong vision. But the promoters wouldn't have the venue with the right lighting. Or they wouldn't have haze, or they wouldn't have, they wouldn't talk about, okay, they'll ask if they've got their own public liability, but what if they hurt themselves, and do they have workers' compensation? Do they have, that kind of insurance? Are we able to deliver the same level of professionalism every show? That kind of stuff. Like, they were the things I was kind of worrying about at the time when I came back in. So when I took over the Vanguard, I said, well, let's create our own in-house burlesque troupe. and we just do our own shows. And that's when we created like the Jaded Vanities. And at the time I said I wanted to get away because everyone would start ringing me up. These corporates would ring me up and go, oh yeah, we want to do a burlesque themed party. And I'm like, okay, so do you want performers? Da, da, da. They go, no, we just want like, fans and feathers and dress up in feather boas and fishnets. I'm like, okay. And that's where I was like saying people were caring more about the aesthetic of burlesque rather than the actual art form. And that started driving me crazy. So we eliminated everything what was associated with burlesque from an outsider's point of view. So none of my performers had stage names. No one is allowed to call for an applause. Like that was a big thing. You used to get fined if you called for an applause.
Like, and that means if you stand there and you're like holding your hand to your ear, and
you're
the
like,
other
come
hand's
on,
like, come on, yeah.
Do you want me to take something off? And they do their little hand gesture, that kind of thing. Because that was happening a lot. And I was just saying, we're not doing that. No one calls themselves great. You have to be someone has to call you great, because a lot of people coming out and saying, they're just creating these ridiculous titles like, I'm the best performer over 6 foot tall or blah, 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 blah.
Yes, I understand.
So there was just so much stuff going on, which was more about the aesthetic rather than the actual art form.
So you created a show that was almost more like a Las Vegas Review or something that you maybe would have seen. And, like it's just, there's dancers, there's performers. This is it. It's not about individuals or...
No, it was about the show. Something? It was about the show and it was meant to be a roller coaster ride. Like most of the burlesque I was seeing around that time was a collection of acts. It wasn't a show. Each act was individual and they weren't, a lot of the time they weren't complimentary. One performer had 15 years experience. The next performer had 2 months, and that was the frustrating part from an audience point of view. I wanted to give them something what they expected. When they saw burlesque presented in a film or in their mind's eye, I wanted to kind of get close to that. And in order to do that, aesthetic. I wanted to, so I amped it up. I spent money on lighting. Brought in lighting designers and things like that. And it was a process. I just didn't come straight out the gate. I had to learn about a whole new set of skills for production. But they were the things we wanted to focus on and really spend time and energy coming up with costumes, what were a bit more concept driven. Once you take away all the corsets, fans, feathering, strip it right back, what kind of show have we got? And Jade of Vanities was more about, it was more about kind of having a show you couldn't tell to somebody. They had to experience it live. Like if you try to describe it to somebody, it'd sound batshit crazy and it'd sound unrealistic and all this kind of stuff. Like for example, we have one act where a girl literally goes to the toilet on stage.
What?
Yeah. She doesn't actually go to the toilet. Like she doesn't urinate or defecate. But the toilet is this...
Ew, gross.
But it gets even worse. This toilet's made out of flesh. So it's living and it breathes and it's got teeth and lips and tongues and all that kind of stuff. And everyone would think that'd be played for a gag. But it's not. It's actually played to be quite erotic and sexual in nature.
Well, frankly, it sounds terrifying.
No, exactly. And that's the whole point. You have to experience it live in order to get it. Because you trying to describe it just sounds horrible and, really grotesque and like shock value. But it's not that at all. Anyone who sees it goes, I get it now. But and that's what we tried to do with Jade of Vanities. Try to create something you had to experience live. It couldn't be filmed. It couldn't be spoken about. You have to see it in context of going out of your house and seeing it live. And that's what we wanted to try and do with all our shows at the Vanguard. It wasn't just burlesque. We did a whole bunch of shows.
No, I know. You've always done a lot of parody shows. You loved that. But wait, I do have a question. So you start to curate these shows in a sense where it's just about the mass of the performers, not one individual person, not one headliner who's named this, and you can go to their website here, and not just a random variety show. Did you feel like when you did that, I mean, I know you gained a lot, but did you feel that you lost any of the gritty punk rock vibe of the early days, or that Whoopee Club energy of you just have no idea what the hell is going to happen next? Did you ever miss that?
It was a trade-off. There was a trade-off of the punk rock energy into something a bit more structured, but at this point we're going to dinner and show. So I had to come to terms with that already. And this is why I say it's an evolution. You have that in the early days to get you through. with that energy. But then once you replace that energy, like you can't perform the same acts. Like some people can, but it's very hard to translate an act. What you create for 100 people in a room and then take it to a stage of 2,000 people.
Of course, for sure.
The glove coming off. So if you have to replace that intimacy with something, you replace it with spectacle, and that's what we
a toilet. You replace it with a flesh toilet with teeth.
Exactly. Something they haven't seen before, And but that's the whole point. Is to kind of create something which still has that energy, but you get more ambitious. That's the thing. Like anything could still go wrong because I'm still doing new things to challenge me.
Did you feel your audience change? Like, but I mean, this is one thing I say too, is like, yeah, of course your audience changes just like you do. Like I have people who've been coming to my shows for the past 20 years, but we're all a little older now. They don't want to stand up at a rock club anymore. I don't want to play until 3:00 in the morning. It's like everything changes. So did you feel that your audience changed?
Oh, they totally did. People appreciated having a seat, people.
Yeah. Oh, God.
That's why I started doing theaters, because I didn't have to worry about eye lines. I didn't have to worry about storage of props. I didn't have to worry about having decent dressing rooms. I didn't have to worry about having good signage. Theaters kind of leveled everything out, So I could spend time on creating a show and just perfecting it, because every venue I played had the bare minimum I needed to do it in,
Yeah, of course.
So as you change as a creator and producer and whatever you want to call the role, and evolve, so should that energy should still be there, because you're pushing it constantly and you're just replacing it for different things. Like my biggest shows, people go batshit crazy at, like as far as cheering and crazy. But then I'll go and see Circus du Soleil show, where it has so much more people, so much more money and everything. And I'm, I love what they do, the spectacle of it all, but I get a little bit bored because I have no intimacy or connection with the performers. It's so big.
No, totally. But I want to say one thing about your shows. So then I feel like as your success started to grow and people are coming to see your shows, you have a lot of ideas. That some might say are slightly strange, but they definitely most. But they have an audience, and almost like a rabid audience, right? So I love like how you started getting into the parody shows. I mean, it's like very specific, strange, niche references that people respond to.
Yeah, well, there's like, because my other big passion, apart from all burlesque and, all that stuff, is pop culture. Like I grew up reading comic books and watching B movies and all that kind of stuff. So like I said, film was always a big influence on what I did. So the plan was to create Jada Vanities as a regular show. And then maybe once a year we'll do like a special fun show, And that's when we started doing the parody shows. I didn't think the parody shows would take over and become the biggest thing we ever did. The first one we did, which is still going to this day, is the Star Wars show, the Empire Strips Back. And I should fully say this in full disclosure. We weren't the first in the world to do it. Courtney Cruz in LA was the first person to do a Star Wars show. I was unaware of that show when I created it.
Is that Star Girls?
Star Girls. The original is called Star Wars Burlesque. And
okay.
I copped a little bit of flack about it when we went viral like a year later, because I think a lazy journalist used one of their photos with our article about us. I had nothing to do with the article, but I copped a lot of flack online saying you stole this idea, and I'm like, I didn't even know it existed. But I actually, when I went to the US, I actually sat down with Courtney and I just said there was no, we were just not two different people in two different parts of the world creating the same idea,
Well, I mean, there's several.
There's so many.
I don't know if they're not established.
You've got the Weekenders. You've got like the guys in Chicago. There's guys in London. Star Wars has been parodied so much in the last 10 years. It's not funny. It's just that Courtney and I were only 6 months apart, and we both went kind of viral. And it wasn't the problem with me and Courtney so much as everyone else who was talking about it.
Of course. Well, that's usually what it is, isn't it?
But our shows are so different. Like, mine's more of a Broadway kind of show, like in the sense of it doesn't play in clubs anymore. It's only on theater stages. But we started the Empire Strips Back in 2011, at the start of 2011, I think. And that kind of just sold out straight away. We're going to do it for one night, and then that sold out within, a day. And then
And you were doing it at the Vanguard.
At the Vanguard first, and that was me. Lisa and I made most of the costumes. We made them out of old toys and plumbing supplies and things like that. The old costumes were so heavy and bulky because we were just using hardware materials. And it just took off. It killed. The first run just sold out so quickly. So we said, let's put it on for a week. That sold out straight away. And then we went viral on that one. And the show's gone viral a bunch of times, but that was kind of the first one. Then we put it on sale for 2 weeks, and then that sold out. Then we started doing 6-week runs of this show in Sydney. And no real big support from anywhere. We were just in our own little bubble. And I was fortunate to own the venue, so I could kind of curate what we put on there. And that was a big part of the Vanguard's thing. We just didn't want to be putting on anything. The venue wanted to have an identity. So if you saw something at the Vanguard, you knew what it was. Like the way CBGBs or something had an identity,
Of course. Quality.
So we kind of, the show kind of kept developing each time we did it. And we started working out, okay, this is good. But then it started getting to a point where I wasn't making much money out of it because it was good for the venue. The venue was making money, but the show wasn't making money because the show got so expensive to put on that the ticket price would just cover itself. And then the venue was making a lot of money. So I said, well, I can create another show for the venue, but this show needs to either evolve or we got to stop doing it because it's just, kind of killing us. So
you chose Evolve. Is that when you decided to take it on the road?
Kind of. We took it on the road a couple of times to a couple of venues in Melbourne and whatnot. And we said, well, we can't go down there for 6 weeks. We have to only go down there for one night. Let's just get a big theatre. And that was shocking. Taking our little show and putting it on a big theatre stage. It looked like so amateur. This thing that was so powerful and engaging in the small venue just seemed lost on a big stage. So after that, I decided I'm not going to do that show anymore. I'm going to take it to the dump, and early in the morning, I destroyed all the props and costumes.
Oh, that's so dramatic, Russell.
Yeah, because I kept wanting to do this for ages, but my business partners were like, "Oh, just do another tour, and then we'll do it." So I didn't give them the option. So I'm
just going to burn everything.
Yeah, and then so we raised some more capital. And we then said, let's do this. Let's do it properly. So we got people who worked on the original Star Wars films to make us our props. We worked our ass off and, we end up making a show which would have cost anyone else probably a couple of $1 million. But for us, we got away with it quite economical. Just because we just didn't have the capital. But we always find a way because, we make props ourselves. We'll make our own costumes. But that's when I started working.
Lisa choreographs it, right?
Yeah, and that's where we started working a lot with special effects artists, And that's when we really said we need dancers because we need a kind of standardized body type and, it's not that standardized. It's just that these costumes are molded in plastic and things like that.
Yeah.
So
that gets to be challenging if you can't have a rotating door. You've got to lock in a cast.
Yeah, and we've got so many people who have gone into bigger things from this show. 2 of our girls have just been cast in Hamilton, the Australian run. And
is one of those Zelia?
One of those is Zelia. Yeah, she was one of our girls she was one of the original girls that came in for the rebuild period. But like we said, we want 8 stormtroopers on stage. We want to have 3 Imperial Guards, and we just wanted to make it spectacle,
Prior to that, were you using mostly burlesque dancers, or were you just using whoever?
No. Prior to 2010, I was using burlesque dancers. After 2010, we kind of made it an in-house production team and troupe. We set it based it on a dance company or an opera company where you'd have your players and they'd sign on. And those first few years, I had a rule you couldn't do burlesque anywhere else. You could perform other places, but you just couldn't do burlesque anywhere else because I was giving them enough work to say that. If you're not giving them enough work, then you can't really request that of people.
Have exclusivity.
But we were doing enough gigs that, at one point, I think 1 year alone, I did probably 200 shows, maybe 1 year.
So that's a full-time job.
Yeah, I lived and breathed that venue. I had an apartment next door to the venue. And my office was across the road from the venue. And so for 2 years there, I I just didn't really leave a 50 foot kind of area. But yeah, and that show kind of exploded then. At the Empire Strips
and
Back.
that took over. That's become like your big driving force, right?
Well, that's what I've spent a lot of time on. Like, you know, we knew we had something because we were selling out Australia every time we played. And these are big venues, big theatre venues. And we started doing multiple nights in these big theatre venues. And then we said, okay, we really want to take this overseas. And we had a few false starts getting over to the US, but we've been over to the US toured twice now. One a little baby tour and then one last year, which was quite substantial. And we finally, our big plan was trying to get a Vegas residency. That was our big plan.
Right.
Everyone said, oh, this would kill in Vegas. This will kill in Vegas.
Oh, absolutely.
And we're like, yeah, we believe it will. And it was funny enough, we finally got to Vegas. We're about to sit down and sign a 3-year contract of Caesars Entertainment.
Yeah.
This was in March.
I know.
And this was the weekend where the world shut down. So
yeah,
I was actually there for the last Circus Soleil show. I was there for the last day all the casinos were open, and we were like, we got to get back to Australia. But it was like out of a movie. We were sitting there, and we were there with all the heads of departments, you know, beverage, and then all of a sudden, text messages started going off. And everyone's like getting up and have to leave. Sorry, I have to leave. Oh, I have to leave. And within 10 minutes, we're left there with like 2 other people out of like 15.
Yeah.
And then we're like, what's going on? And then we saw that the world is closing down. And we were like, shit, we better get back to Australia. And then that deal's kind of evaporated. It's no longer there.
Well, everything's kind of evaporated. But I was so sad because, you know, we were supposed to be in Vegas for most of this year. And I was like, oh my God, we're both going to be in Vegas. It's going to be so much fun. And ha, ha, ha. Not quite. But one thing you said, like, about how you would, like, you take out everything that doesn't work in the show. I have a friend who's a producer in Vegas, and we were talking about Vegas shows, and he was like, you know, a Vegas show is where they'll take a show that's on Broadway, and they'll take out every second that the audience isn't going crazy. Any minute that's looked at as downtime is removed from a show before it runs in Vegas. Like, the only thing that runs in Vegas is up, up, up. Like, every second of the show is a hit, you know? And it's true. I've seen shows on Broadway and I've seen the same show in Vegas. And I'm like, wait a minute. That one's shorter and it was missing this and this and this. And oh, wait, those were all the parts that I thought were kind of boring. So it's a perfect fit.
I often say I don't want the audience to walk out. I want them to dance out. You know, I don't want them to leave at the end of the night. You know,
so what do you think the future holds now? I mean, do you aspire to return to that deal?
We'll see. But, you know, we had to pivot. Like, burlesque isn't the only thing I do. I should kind of point that out. I also have a publishing company and produce books, podcasts. And when we kind of realized we couldn't do any shows this year and our whole year plans have just been thrown out the window, like, I moved out of my house. I sold my car. I did all these things kind of prepping to move over to Vegas, you know.
Yeah. Oh, man.
So we pivoted and we decided to make a feature film. So within the space of 5 months, we wrote, raised the money, and shot during the pandemic a feature horror film, which we're in post-production.
How do you have a staff? Because I know you have so many people who work for you and Craig who are so adaptive to so many different forms of entertainment.
It's kind of sink or swim mentality. They don't get an option.
Yeah.
So even Steph and Lisa, who, like, you know, Lisa is my choreographer, but we couldn't choreograph anything. I said, so Lisa, guess what?
Yeah.
You're now producing a podcast. Go get it. And then, you know, it's a learning curve, but, you know, everyone has to kind of adapt, because if you don't, that's the age we live in. And Australia's too small. You can't, if you want to be independent in Australia, you have to be able to multitask. And I know everyone multitasks, but Australia's just not a big country, and we're kind of locked into certain entertainment ideas. You know, anything too out there is going to be niche, you know? So you're going to have to be adapt. And like, for me to do all my niche ideas, I have to do a mainstream show like Empire Strips Back. I never thought I'd be doing that for 10 years almost, you know? Next year's our 10-year anniversary.
Well, it's grown into that, right? I mean, it's grown into that. And that's kind of been an organic thing, though, driven by your long-term site.
You know, I love the show and I still love doing it, but I don't like repeating myself. So
yeah, but it hasn't lived its final vision, though, and that's the
No.
thing. It got cheated a little bit this year, so it's okay to take the time. And now you've done your film. We did the podcast. You know, you've got your books that you do. You have the Wookiee magazine, which is epic. Brian is in love with that magazine. So you know, you have all these things, but you have to go back, and the Empire Strips Back has to like live its destiny.
well, yeah, and in the meantime, we're doing these fun things. Like next month, we'll have this new. It's going to be a version of the show, but for online streaming. It's called the Empire Strips Back Holiday Special, and it's going to be kind of like the way I can describe it to people. It's going to be a combination of Saturday Night Live from the 1980s, The Muppet Show, and Soul Train.
Nice. That's all very exciting things.
We're making that we're making it at the moment, and it'll be available next month.
Adapt.
You have to sink or swim.
What do you think about, I mean, you know, you've come a long journey in this, from being a stage manager at the Whoopee Club to owning your own nightclub, to touring so many different shows, to creating the Empire Strips Back, which is now its whole own thing, and all your other projects. And I know you've touched upon it a little bit, but if you could just succinctly, the evolution of burlesque, like what would you like to see happen for it? And do you think that it's possible?
The main thing I would love to see is everyone taking up production a notch. Mm-hmm. Like I still go to shows and look at production, and I'm kind of going, it's not hard to do lighting these days. This digital lighting's so easy to do, and it's so much cheaper than traditional, you know, lighting back in the day. Spend a little bit of time on production, getting to know the spaces, and, you know, not everything has to be about the costume, you know?
Right.
The concepts and production is the thing where I find a little bit lacking. I don't know what the pay system's like, but I always was a little bit disappointed that there was no standardized pay system. You know, there should be like a minimum for acts, and then, you know, everyone can negotiate above that, but there should be a minimum. And I don't know if that's still there. Promoters have to have full insurance. If they're getting performers to come and perform on their stages, they have to make sure they're covered if something happens to their performers on stage. Public liability is not enough. You need to have more than just that. And if you want to call it an industry, make sure there's a standard. That's what industry is. It's a collection of standards, what everyone follows in order to, you know, have a level which everyone works at and tries to achieve to. And I find that even though the burlesque revival's been around now for 25 years or so, it still kind of felt like a newer kind of thing, you know?
But don't you think, I mean, I just want to like play a little bit of devil's advocate to you, is I totally understand what you're saying, and I get it. But not everybody, I think, can be a lifer and have, I mean, like, I kind of think of it like live music or like community theater. You're going to have somebody on Broadway, and there's always going to be community theater. Community theater funnels it, and every once in a while, someone's going to come out of that community theater and go on to Broadway. Like, so there's, you know, there's Dita, you know, there's Dirty Martinis, there's me's, there's use. There's people who have gone to the next level and developed these kind of full-fledged careers and have productions that are up to snuff.
But those next levels are things everyone's created themselves. They don't exist independently. Right. And a performer who isn't a producer, who doesn't want to be a producer, who doesn't want to produce their own shows, should have a stage and a platform and a career opportunity where they're going to be taken care of and rewarded for all those hard years on the smaller circuits. You know, and every other industry has that. Like, you know, you look at circus. You start off circus in, you know, shittier shows or little tent shows or nightclubs, whatever, sideshow shows. But then you've got plenty of opportunities in a much larger circuit which have all that. You know, they have, you know, you have Cirque, you have how many shows on Vegas and around the world, cruise line you know, there's cruise lines and all that kind of stuff, which is kind of natural progression. Burlesque itself doesn't have that many shows which are high end. You know, dedicated burlesque shows. And
why do you think that is? Because you're right. I mean, even drag has a career path that's more clear than burlesque.
I think also there's a bit of ignorance around burlesque. Like, a lot of people don't know the difference when they go and see a burlesque show. They go and see a burlesque show. They don't know the difference between good and bad burlesque.
Yeah.
Or newer performers and experienced performers. They might get it when they watch it on the night. But there is that thing where you need to kind of, you know, with an audience, educate them as well. Because if there's no huge demand for it, you know, then no one's going to create a space like that. And I do find, like, for a long time, I found like burlesque was like on people's to-do list. Like, let's go and see a burlesque show. Didn't matter what kind of burlesque show they're going to see. They just wanted to see a burlesque show, you know? And as you're very well, like, the standard of burlesque differs so much out there in the world. And it's just, I just think if we can just be a little bit stricter on, like, and this is more on promoters. I say this all the time. It's on promoters. You have to create spaces. If performers are going to spend time, energy developing acts, you have to spend time and energy developing spaces for those acts.
Absolutely. Well, I will say you gave me 2 pieces of advice. I mean, I think you've given me a lot, but there's 2 specifically that I always remember, and I tell other people, and I always do say they came from you. I don't remember where we were. I think we might have been in New Zealand. I'm not sure. Or maybe it was Perth, but we were doing a lighting tech, and I was annoyed, and I wanted to go, and you were like, well, we have to make this light like this, and this light like that. And I was like, over it. And you were like, just remember, good lighting can make a bad performer look amazing and amazing performer look bad. And I just was like, oh my God, that is so true. Because I've seen acts that aren't exciting, but then they put on this amazing light show and all of a sudden you're like at a rock concert. And the other advice you gave me, which also kind of goes into what you just said, was it's good to be hungry, but watch what you eat. Like, in regard, I think I was like venting to you about just how I keep saying yes to all the stuff that I don't necessarily want to do. And you shouldn't have to. You don't have to say yes to everything. So if an opportunity isn't going to help you or present you in the proper way, it's not an opportunity.
Yeah. Well, as I say to every performer, there's 3 things you need to do when you judge any kind of job being offered. 1, does it pay well? 2, am I going to learn something from it, or is it going to further my career? 3, am I going to have fun? If it doesn't have any one of those, then don't do the gig.
Well, Russell, thank you so much for being on the Bump and Grind. Thank you so much for helping make the Bump and Grind happen. Also,
I hope you enjoyed my chat with Russell. I wanted to take a second here and give big thanks and love to not only Russell, but to his team at Giant Panda King. Craig Airhug Ridgewell, Stephanie Liebeck, Lisa Toyer, and James Barry, all who work very hard to bring you the Bump and Grind every week. Keep up with Russ on Instagram at AKA Sexy Boss. Keep up with the adventures and the projects of Giant Panda King at Giant Panda King. You know where to find me at Angie Pontani. And please like, follow, subscribe, give a good review, send an episode to your friends. Whatever you need to do, give us that good love so that we can keep bringing the Bump and Grind back to you week after week.
This has been a Giant Panda King production. You can find us at giantpandaking.com and on Instagram at giantpandaking.